It's now my very great pleasure to introduce Norm Tame, who will be our first speaker today. Norm was a sailor in the flagship HMAS Australia. He was present at the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, when American and Australian vessels halted the Japanese assault on Port Moresby. Please join me in welcoming Norm.
Yeah, I'm Norm Tame, and I joined the Navy on July the 8th, 1940. I went through my training at Flinders Naval Depot and was duly drafted to HMAS Australia in mid-March 1941, the very day the Australia returned from UK. And we proceeded into the Indian Ocean, and we weren't very far out at sea when we were turned round and came back to Albany, and then on to Sydney, and were given leave. And we went over to, after that, we went over to New Zealand and twice, and we picked up a convoy, a big convoy. Now in that convoy was the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, Ile de France, New Amsterdam and Mauritania. And it was a pretty sight when they turned the next morning after we left Sydney, turned into Bass Strait. Well, we took them across to the Indian Ocean and stopped at Fremantle, and then Queen Mary went to Singapore. We went on to Colombo, and an RN cruiser took over from there and escorted them. We went back to Sydney and back to New Zealand and picked up another convoy, and we came across. This time we went to Trincomalee, and from Trincomalee we went to Aden and the North and the Red Sea. Well, after the Red Sea, we came back to Aden and stayed in Aden for some time. Then we went down to around Cape Garda and we picked up a convoy of troops who had just recaptured Abyssinia from the Dagos. Well, we went on then.
That's us, Jim.
We went on down to Mombasa, took those troops back to Mombasa, and then we went to Durban, and we escorted another convoy up to the Middle East, and we were on our way back from the Middle East, and it just turned south after coming round to go down to Durban, and suddenly we turned and went east, and we went to Singapore, and there was all these Colombo, I should say, we went to, and on these barges there they brought out were crates all labelled for Singapore. Well, they never saw Singapore. We ended up at the Kerguelen Islands. The Germans and the Japanese were exchanging produce and food and fuel in the fields. So we mined the fields, and nothing was ever said about that. That was to be hush-hush. Well, we came back up to Durban and eventually went out to sea, and we had the HMS Hawkins with us. And we were trying to catch a convoy that had come from Vietnam and was trying to get round to Dakar in northwest Africa. But there was a terrible peacekeeper fog, and we lost sight of the Hawkins, and we weren't allowed to use radio contact or anything. Then the minesweepers, they were Norwegian North Sea fishing boats converted to minesweepers, and they captured the convoy. So we were out there, and they were told to return to Durban. Well, we couldn't see the Hawkins, and eventually we did find it, and we made our way back there, and then we had to go into dock. We had a bent propeller. So we went into dock in Cape Town, and on, I think it was about 1st of December, one early day then, And I came back ashore in the morning and everybody's racing around, and we went to sea. When we got to sea, we were told we were going to the middle of the Indian Ocean, pending action by the Japanese. Well, it came at about 2 o'clock one morning, and we immediately proceeded to Fremantle, and from Fremantle we went round to Sydney, and I don't think any ship has done it faster since. It was 70 odd hours it took us, and we were back off Sydney. And we were only there for a couple of days. We took a convoy up to Port Moresby and did a couple of trips around the islands, Fiji, Noumea and places like that. And we went back to Sydney, and we learned exactly what we did there. A bit of time in dock, I think it was. And then we proceeded north up to Moreton Bay, and we get a load of new people on board, the draft on board. And those poor beggars, I felt sorry for them. They were only young fellows straight. Some have only been in the Navy 3 weeks, mind you, and they practised solidly loading 4-inch guns all day. And it was getting pretty hot up there. Well, we were then informed that the Battle of the Coral Sea was coming up. That the Japanese were intended to land at Port Moresby. Well, we did see the American fleet, and then we split up. If you remember, the Coral Sea is a pretty vast space, and there were 3 fleets, and there was the Yorktown and the Lexington, and each of them was more or less a Yankee battle fleet, and then they had the Australia and the Chicago and 4 destroyers. And it was on the 7th, I think it was, that we came under fire, and we'd had a few scares, and the first thing we had was I think they were torpedo bombers. I was on the starboard wing of the bridge, alongside the compass platform. I could hear what was going on mainly too. And they disappeared. And then later in the day, there was a dozen of them, torpedo bombers, and they showed up again. And they flew up on the port side. I couldn't see them until they got up near the destroyers, and they were past them, and they turned and headed towards us. Now, there was 12 of them, they say. I only counted 11 in my count. But 10 of them were shot down. They dropped their torpedoes, and then they turned round. They went through the fleet, and they turned round, and they came back machine gunning us. Well, they were chopped to pieces by when they got into the fire from the pom-poms, and there was only one I could see that flew away. Well, they said 2 got home, so can't argue with that. And they'd no sooner gone, and the word came through, high-level bombers approaching. Estimated height was 14,000 feet. Well, they were out of our gunnery range. And they came over, and my divisional officer on the compass platform, asked me to count them while I'd been relieved from the submarine lookout I was doing. And I counted them, and I counted 22. There were 19 Japanese high-level bombers in a diamond-shaped formation, and on the trailing edge of the diamond they had another 3. So there was 4 in each wing, and another 3, there was 19. But behind them was 3 American planes. And by that time you could see the bombs coming down, and their bombing was perfect. But they were in diamond-shaped formation, and that diamond landed on us. and we were in the middle of the diamond and never got hit. And every man on the upper deck, even the man up in the masthead, Phil Craven, he was a Olympic swimmer in 1936, was drenched. And the deck was, you could shovel the shrapnel up that was there, and the water was cascading over the side. The Americans had said goodbye to us. Well, funny thing, a couple of days later now, some of you may have heard what I said to Malcolm Turnbull. And Malcolm got up and he said this at question time, when he was asked about question time over he went to New York early in May at the luncheon with, the dinner with Mr. Trump. And he had to talk to me beforehand. And what happened was, there was 2 Japanese torpedo bombers, and they flew that close to the ship's side that they couldn't press the guns on them. And there was an English chap, he was a chief petty officer, he'd been sunk in the Battle of Java a few weeks before and shanghaied onto the Australia. And he was having a bit of a dig at some of the gunners for not having shot it down. And he said, why didn't you shoot it down? He said, I could have hit it with a spud. And that's what Malcolm got up and sold him. But it actually happened. Well, after that, our next battle was the Battle of Savo was involved in it, but the landing at Guadalcanal. We went through that, and we went through, there was later on a big battle, and the Americans refer to it as the Battle of Eastern Solomons, or Battle of Reinforcements. And that was where I saw the greatest concentration of American warships during the war, because there was the Saratoga, USS Saratoga, the Wasp, and I forget what the other one was. It got hit, and it was back in action in 2 hours. But on that day, that afternoon, there were 70-odd planes shot down, and there was 12 Americans planes lost, and 5 of them ran out of fuel just as they were about to land on the aircraft carrier. But luckily the pilots were recovered because they had a destroyer behind ready for that sort of thing. But that was the biggest battle, sea battle that I was in. Well, we had another landing at Gasmata, and then there was a landing at Cape Gloucester, and that was my last battle aboard HMAS Australia. I was mastheadman there, sitting up in the clouds, couldn't see anything. And after that we came back to Australia, and I was drafted away to HMAS Canimbla for assault purposes. And we got back up to New Guinea with a load of American troops and got back as far as Goodenough Island, and there they unloaded us, and they took us all the way back to Townsville with a load of Americans, and the Americans were loaded off and gone as soon as we hit the wharf, and they left everything behind. Well, we had our hammocks full of all sorts of things that they left behind, and we went up to Cairns, because they had nowhere to put us. They put us in a hotel, and we were there for some days, and then up to the Tablelands. We were only there for a few days, and we're back down to what is now Palm Beach, of all places. And that's where they formed a 2nd Naval Beach Commando Group. Now, I was a member of the group, but I didn't do any training. Every day I walked down, halfway down that beach and across the creek. If the tide was in, they gave me a jeep, a ride round, and I spliced wire for the 42nd Water Transport, 3-inch steel wire rope to make moorings for landing craft, and that's all we did. And then come early 1945, and we're shipped off, and we go to Morotai, way over to Morotai, and we weren't there very long, and we took part in the landing at Tarakan, and we stayed there for 17 days with them, and then we came back and re-provisioned and everything, and then off, and we landed at Balikpapan. Well, at Balikpapan, the war finished whilst we were there, and I came back to Australia, and I was only there a few days. It was quite humorous as was. We got back here, and I lived out at about 3 miles out of Hurstbridge at a place called Nutfield, and Dad brought me in and dropped me to the depot, and there's one of my mates, he's on sentry, and he, you're on draft. Well, I was too. And I went to HMAS Deloraine, and we were mine sweeping up off New Guinea and Rabaul, and that was sweeping magnetic mines. And I got transferred from there to Trincomalee again to pick up LSTs, and we brought the LSTs back to Australia, and we stayed serviced around up in the islands there for 12 months or more, and I got a draft from there to HMAS Wairau, which was the first expedition to Antarctica after the war. And then I went to Antarctica, and after that I went to Manus Island, and I served 15 months at Manus Island, and during which time I travelled around the islands on a tug, supplying the coast watchers with new batteries and battery chargers and radio sets if they wanted. We had a senior coast watcher with us, Dusty Rhodes, and one of the coast watchers up there, he was the fella that gave the message to us at Guadalcanal that 40 Jap bombers are on their way, the expected time of arrival 10:55. And I knew his voice, and I heard it come over, and it was Jack Keenan from Wattle Glen, and he was a school teacher. He taught me at school. And I saw him when we were going round at Finchhaven, and I asked him, he said, where were you? You got a surprise when I told you. Yeah.
Norm, I wonder if I could, if I might interrupt you there, and take you back to the moment when in the Coral Sea, when you saw those 12 or perhaps 11 torpedo bombers coming towards you. I mean, this was the first battle in history where I guess it was a new kind of warfare, and not, I imagine, what you would have expected to encounter as you headed off towards the Coral Sea.
That's true.
Do you remember? You've described sort of, what you could see. I'm interested to know what you thought and what you felt at that moment.
Oh, we all knew what sort of battle it was going to be, but we never thought it was going to be ship to ship until we got to. We were sent up to the Jomard Passage, and that's where the Japanese landing fleet was to come through. And we were, it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and they were 90 miles away, and we were converging at a speed of about 20 7 or 30 knots, and we never ever saw them, of course. After they turned back. Well, it's been disputable and through the years, and only in recent years the Japanese said they never had enough troops to carry on.
The level of detail with which you've recalled sort of particular days and even the passage of your ship around the world is amazing. And of course, Manus Island is in use for very different reasons these days. Are there particular images from your period of service that never leave you? Whether it's something that I imagine is quite sort of beautiful and remarkable, like that convoy turning into Bass Strait that you referred to earlier,
yes.
or other kind of days or slices in time that you never lose from your mind's eye?
Well, as a kid, I was a keen gardener, vegetables that was, and I always wanted to know where everything got its name. And Kerguelen, I mentioned the island, the lettuce, the Kerguelen cabbage. Now, I'll never forget that place is just supposed to be like Norway.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've never been to Norway, but it's fjords and it's ice, and it's covered with all sorts of things. The wildlife that's there was amazing.
Yeah.
The ducks and there was sea elephants and seals and you name it, they were there. That place really did fascinate me.